We're going to talk about a story that's been pretty prevalent since Sunday with the beat writer for Oklahoma State for the Oklahoman, and that is Scott Wright. Scott, good morning.
Hey, Robert, how are you?
I'm good, but I you were at the wrestling on Sunday.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be, but I had switched with Zach Lancaster, and I had covered the basketball on Saturday, and he had a Saturday off, and he was covering the wrestling. Um, if Oklahoma State wanted to get points for being sneaky about when they announce hires, this one would get, if not a 10, it'd get a 9 point something, because I think it caught everybody by surprise.
I would agree. I was appreciative that they did it in the form of a an announcement that said what his job was, and that they had a press release, unlike Coach Gundy's Twitter last year that just announced that Jim Knowles was joining the program, and Greg Richmond and all those other guys. Made us all get to some serious work trying to figure out what all those guys were going to be doing. But you're right.
I forgot about that.
They did sneak in with a little bit with this one on Sunday afternoon. That's for sure.
I will say this: compared to the last time they hired an offensive coordinator, if you remember with Mike Yursich, we were all trying to find stuff out. It was a little harder to find things out from Shippensburg State. And I remember the YouTube video that everybody pulled from and used was Yursich on a makeshift coaches show using Star Wars figures to diagram his offense. This one is a little, Princeton, it isn't Division I FBS, but Ivy League football is a little more prevalent, and it's a little easier to find people to talk about him than it was Yursich when they made that hire.
Yeah, exactly. They have Princeton give their SID credit. He's been incredibly helpful, I think, to several of us. Quite a guy and very helpful. So, been able to get in touch with a lot of people to learn as much as we can about Sean Gleeson. So, yeah, definitely easier than the Yursich investigative reporting we had to do. I say we.
Yeah,
I wasn't involved, but I watched it.
Yeah, and we've all gone down some of the same avenues and some of the different avenues. Let me pick one that you and I was different, that you went down, I didn't, and that was really probably his mentor of all mentors. Coached him as a quarterback at Williams College in college, and then was his main connection going over there and being a gym rat with the Princeton staff. And then later on, he worked as a running back coach at Princeton with James Perry as the offensive coordinator. You talked to him. Give us an idea of what you culled from your conversation with James Perry, who's now the head coach at Brown, by the way.
Yes, he is. Perry, from everybody that I've talked to, Perry is the guy who earliest on identified Sean Gleeson as someone who had a unique talent in the coaching field. He only coached him for 1 year at Williams before he moved on, but he said that when he got to Princeton and was working there, and Gleeson had gotten out of school, he said that Gleeson had a lot of qualities that he wanted in the program on his offensive staff, and he started in right away trying to get him up to Princeton. That's why Gleeson started going up and attending those practices and just hanging out. And then he had some other coaching jobs along the way, but finally got in on the coaching staff at Princeton as a running backs coach. And Perry told me after the first year, he started telling people this guy's going to be the head coach at Notre Dame, which he said in his mind, growing up as a Catholic boy, Notre Dame was the pinnacle of college football coaching. So that's how highly he thought of Sean Gleason's coaching ability. said that he has a lot of qualities that you just don't see even at a school like Princeton, where you got a lot of really smart guys running the football program around there. He's got a lot of unique qualities, and so he expected him to find his way to upper level football eventually. He didn't know how long it would take for somebody to find him or what the path would be, but he saw the way that he coaches, the way that he presents information to kids in an easy to understand way, his understanding of analytics, and how he lets that influence him into how he game plans, and then just his game planning in general, he thought was off the charts. So Perry has long been impressed with what Gleeson can do, and expects big things of him at Oklahoma State.
And Scott, when you talk to Coach Perry, I mean, what kind of guy? I mean, I'm assuming he was pretty personable.
Perry was?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, very much so. He was a very very charismatic and personable guy, very intelligent, you could tell, and obviously a really talented coach himself to be a head coach at Brown, which is where he graduated from.
Yeah, we both talked to Chad Canoff, and I thought, that was, to me, that was extremely enlightening. And I read your story today with some of the comments from Chad. And I think if you're really going to find out the most about an offensive coordinator and quarterback coach, if you can find one of his guys that's as good a communicator as Chad is. I don't know what Chad majored in or what he got his degree in at Princeton, but he was very well spoken. I mean, he put together really, really good thoughts and complex thoughts in talking about Sean Gleeson. What were some of the things that stood out in your conversation with Chad?
It was funny. Some of the first things that we got started talking about, because I was sort of going chronologically in how I worked my way up to get into that 1 year that they spent together as quarterback and offensive coordinator. And he talked about how when Gleeson was the special teams coordinator in 2016, and Canoff was the punter. And so he didn't always make the special teams meetings because he had other stuff that he had to do, but he spent a lot of time in those meetings, and he realized how detail oriented Sean Gleeson was, and how a special teams coordinator has a lot of different things that are a lot of really small pieces that you have to put together to make everything work. And he said that his way for gathering all the information and presenting it to the players, and addressing each specific role that they had. He said that he was very impressed with that. And then once Gleeson became the offensive coordinator, he said, practice time was very efficient. The way that they used their time, the way that they, the way that he presented information to them in a way that made it easy for them to understand. He said was just off the charts. Said he has an intense side as well, which I think he talked about with you also. So that's going to be interesting to get to see some of the dynamics of that. Obviously, I won't get to see it as much as you will, but I'm curious to know what exactly that looks like. Canoff was very, very appreciative of the things that he learned under Gleeson, and obviously he's doing big things with it out in the NFL with the Arizona Cardinals now.
Yeah, and you know what? This had nothing to do with Gleeson, but we were talking about. I was trying to throw something back Canoff's way, and through Dana Holgerson, I've gotten to know Cliff Kingsbury a little bit because he and Dana are pretty close, and I've even sat in some informal settings with Dana and with Cliff Kingsbury. And so I said, hey, I kind of know your new head coach. And when he started telling me about Gleeson, I said, well, yeah, that coaching manner is going to change for you because uh, Cliff is very laid back in his coaching style. He's not a, I mean, he'll get intense, but it'll be a quiet intensity. It won't be loud yelling, anything like that. That's just not Cliff Kingsbury. And he goes, oh, that's good to know. I'd kind of heard that he was laid back, and I said, yeah. And then I said, and his offense, it's not the same as what you did at Princeton, but it's gonna have a lot of similarity. And he made a really good statement for any young quarterback that's transitioning right now from college to the NFL, at least like Big 12 quarterbacks and quarterbacks that are coming out of predominant spread offenses. He said, last year when I got to the NFL, my background in college was a detriment. Now
Huh?
my background in college is an advantage. And I thought that was pretty headsy on his part. He realizes that now his background and his experience now puts him ahead of the game rather than behind the game. Um, Here's another thing. I've been throwing out stuff. I had a conversation with Hunziker driving in this morning, and I said, Dave, one of the more incredible stats I found about this guy, because Dave's a numbers guy. If I can find some good numbers that'll impress him, I've done something. Last year, and I think you and I may have talked about this last night. Last year, because they won so many games by so much, they played three different backup quarterbacks, and one of them played 7 games, and another played 5, and then the fourth quarterback got into 2 games. That's a bunch. The combined stats for those three guys last year was 48 of 67 for 552 yards, 6 touchdown passes, no interceptions. So that tells you that even though those guys don't get reps and they're not going to get as much one-on-one time as John Lovett, the starter, did with Gleeson, he's still doing a pretty good job of preparing his second, third, and fourth quarterbacks to go out and execute.
Yeah, and up and down the list, whoever it was, when you go look at stats over the last 2 years, um, he puts his quarterbacks in good situations to have open receivers. It seems like they've got a ton, or they have really high completion percentages across the board. And I understand that yes, they do have some really good quarterbacks, but their completion percentages are off the charts good. So there's a lot of interesting numbers, and you talked about the lack of negative plays when we were talking last night, and so I went and looked up some more on that, and that's pretty impressive with just the way that they value the ball and take care of the ball. Obviously, the defenses are going to be at a different level at the Big 12, more athletes and things like that. But the principles of what he focuses on are going to be really valuable, I think, in Oklahoma State's offense.
Yeah, another thing too, I was kind of curious about, especially after Canoff talked about being the punter in 16, and I didn't go look and see how many times he actually got to punt the football, which I'm going to guess it wasn't dramatically different. But the last 2 years, uh, Princeton has punted the football 26 times one season and 24 the other.
Yeah.
Last year, Oklahoma, that's a grand total of 50 punts, unless my math
Right.
is off. 26 and 24 adds up to 50. Hey, I always got to double check myself. That was not my best subject in school.
Right.
Last year,
I'm there
Oklahoma
with
State. Yeah, last year Oklahoma State punted 52 times.
you. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
now I they go for a lot more fourth downs. It looks like because
Right.
combined the last 2 years they were 30 of 44 on fourth down tries. So there's a lot more than what Oklahoma State does. That may be an interesting dichotomy, is watching on fourth downs, um, the mental, and because you don't have much time to do it, the mental conflict between Gleeson, who's probably going to want to go for a lot, and
Hmm.
Gundy, who has to make that decision, yay or nay.
Right.
You know, that might be fun to watch. Of
Yeah.
course,
It
we can't get on
it
the
really will.
headset and listen.
Yeah, that will be a fun one, and uh, just the I mean, 30 of 44 is a pretty ridiculous number. Not just the total number of times, but to succeed 30 times in 44 tries is pretty crazy. So I think that I think Kenoff told you and I both the same thing um, in that Gleeson has a plan for how a series should go, how a series of downs should play out, and it seems to be very effective in his when you look at his third down completion rate, and then the fourth downs is just pretty crazy. I'll be interested to see his creativity in those situations when he does get to go for it on fourth down.
Scott Wright from the Oklahoma is the beat writer for Oklahoma State. He's on with us right now here on Triple Play Sports, and we'll wrap it up with Scott. One of the things you and I both, I mean, when the search is going for the offensive coordinator, and Mike Gundy is not a guy that throws a lot of crumbs out there. I mean, if your hands on Gretel, you're never going to make it home because Gundy's not going to leave you enough crumbs to find your way in a coaching search for sure. But we all had to kind of scrounge and look, and the most prominent theory was when you had two veteran coaches on your staff with Josh Henson on the offensive line and what Casey Dunn's done with wide receivers, both know the offense, that you might hire from within. I think we all wrote stories on that. We all also looked around, but this is a story now that'll have to play out. Um, when Mike Yursich came in, there was one really senior assistant in that room, in the offensive room. It was Joe Wickline, and I think Wickline was already looking for where he was going to go. I think in his mind he was looking for somewhere else. In this case, Sean Gleeson, who's 34, it took me a while to find his age.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, dang. Anyway, he's 34. He's going to come into a room where, again, both Henson and Dunn are older, and even McAdoo and Wozniak have been here, and so he's going to have to develop chemistry in his room. That's going to be a major story. Just watching how the offensive staff comes together, and they're pros. I mean, they're going to work together, but we all know. I mean, any workplace there's sometimes some drama, and in this one, you want to kind of keep as little as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And just like you said, what Dunn had been in Stillwater for 2 years before Yursich came in. And then Henson comes in later, and all three of those guys I think worked incredibly well together. The entire staff, but those three guys in
Yeah,
particular, because of their different involvements, I think worked really well together. And this, with Gleeson coming in and those guys being as established as they are, is going to be different. It just is, and I think that those guys are going to be a big benefit to Gleeson. But the way that this all blends together is definitely going to be an interesting storyline to watch, and just to see how because Mike Gundy made the comments back before it had been announced that Yursich was leaving, that the last couple of times that they've stuck with their terminology, they've stuck with their offense. They've taught that to the new offensive coordinator. So there's going to be some work to be done on that, and Gleason's going to be the new guy, even though he's the coordinator. He's the new guy for a while in this whole thing. So it's going to be an interesting chemistry lesson to see how all of that comes together.
absolutely. Hey, last thing, you've got the Cowgirls beat. Not very often you get the number one team in the country to come into play at your place, and I mean that can be a good thing, and obviously it can be a not so good thing. Cowgirls did not play real well the other day against Iowa State. Now they get number one ranked Baylor.
Yeah, I'm torn as to whether it's good timing or bad timing, because they lost two in a row for the first time this season. They fell behind at Kansas State early and got beat up there. Then behind 42-11, middle of the second quarter against Iowa State, and played really well from that point on. But it was way too big a hole to get out of. But Jim Littell talks about how they're lacking some confidence right now, and it's not a good time to be lacking confidence when Baylor's coming to town. But it could be that they maybe hit a low spot with Iowa State and are ready to bounce back and play well. I'm not saying they're going to come out and beat Baylor. This is a team that knocked off UConn earlier in the year and rolling through just about everybody that they play. But to go out and have a good performance against Baylor, I think would be a big boost for this team right now, because they've got some winnable games ahead on the schedule, and they need to get things going in the right direction. Here pretty quickly, so they can put some wins behind them, and because really after the top three, after Baylor, Texas, Iowa State, Big 12 is wide open from that point down, and so it's not out of the realm of possibility that Oklahoma State could be in the running for the fourth spot, but they've got to get things back on track and start winning some ball games, and so they need to come out of this at least feeling like they gave their best effort and played as well as they could have.
All right, Scott, I appreciate it. I don't know. I'm guessing the first time we'll get to talk to Gleeson might be February 6th. That might be part of the. There's not going to be a lot of recruits to talk about because, as it looks, there may be two guys signed that day. But my guess is if they have a press conference that day, they might lump in the new offensive coordinator. I'm looking for the soonest possible, but
right, sure.
We know how it usually goes.
Yep, exactly. We'll see what happens. I'm with you. If we can get in February 6th, I'm all in.
There you go. Hey, Scott, I appreciate it.
Awesome, Robert. Thanks, man.
All right, Scott Wright. He'll be. I think I'll run into him at 2:30. We got wrestling availability with John Smith and Cowboy Wrestling, and then I know Scott's got duty tonight with the Cowgirl basketball game hosting Baylor.